Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of TEQ. I'm your host, Carolina Milanesi. Today, the title it's quite an important title, is Beyond Code, the Art of Human and AI Collaboration. We talked a lot in 2023 about AI and about collaboration. We haven't really tackled yet, though, what is going to be the core of, in my opinion, the success for AI in the future work, which is the collaboration between us human and AI. And today I have the perfect guest to talk about that, somebody that knows a thing or two about collaboration. I have with me Cisco Executive VP and General Manager of Security and Collaboration, Jeetu Patel. And Jeetu really picked the right time to join Cisco, right at the beginning of the pandemic, and had the extraordinary job to really take the company platform WebEx and all the customers into a new phase of innovation and really changing the way we work as we were all at home. He comes from Box, so he knows about future of work and the power of a cloud-first approach to everything that we do. And I want to tackle with him today, as I said, the collaboration between AI and human, and how the fact that AI really promises to enhance decision making and automate mundane tasks and spark level of innovation that we haven't seen before, because it's freeing us human to really live our full potential. But unless we are able to really collaborate in a not equal footing, but certainly in a two-way, if you want, relationship with AI, I don't think that promise will come alive. And I'm really curious to see what Jeetu thinks about this. So help me welcome Jeetu to the conversation.
Hello, Carolina. How are you? Thank you for
Hi,
having
how
me.
are you?
It's great to be here. And what I've tried to do now is, because all of the people that I really like are so busy and sometimes we can't align our schedules, I just go on their podcast so that we can talk for 30 minutes, because otherwise,
I know, right? We were talking about getting together, and it's like, this is how we get together and coming as a guest to my podcast. And I appreciate that. I want to take you back, hopefully, exciting, but I'm pretty sure some painful times, which is when you first joined Cisco, and ask you, how do you actually innovate? The amount of innovation that you brought to WebEx was amazing. And you did it at a time where the strain and the level of stress on the team and in the company for you and all your customers, I don't think that we've been through something as high as that. So how do you innovate in that environment?
yeah, in fact, a lot of people ask me this question because when I first joined, for the first 9 months, I had not met anyone other
I
than Chuck
remember.
person. Chuck, I had met Chuck one time, who's my boss, who's our CEO. But other than him, I hadn't met anyone else. Frankly, I think the reason for the success and the hyper innovation we had was the fact that we were virtual.
Mm,
And part of the reason I say that is because my ramp time at Cisco was extremely compressed, because in the first 30 days, I met with like 1,000 people, right? And meetings no more than the size of 8 to 10 in a meeting. In the next 30 days, we ratified a strategy with the board. And in the next 30 days, we syndicated that strategy out and then started executing.
wow.
And that would have been impossible to do if you were
Mm,
trying to go out and get people to do it when you were, meeting in person. So, so that was one. The second thing that was remarkable about this team, and so you get a lot of credit when you're at the top, but it's actually undue, because the team was the same team that had been around
right.
for a long time. All we did was changed the direction and said, this is what we're going to do. And that same team executed at the level that they did. Like our NPS score was 20. We are now in the mid 60s or close to 70. Our uptime used to be like, hours and hours of downtime. We're now in 5 nines territory. So the reason that we were able to do that is because the team was intrinsically hungry to win. And all they needed was someone who could actually set the right direction and then get the obstacles out of the way.
Yeah.
And then they were just rock stars. And a lot of these people.
Yes, I do.
It's probably one of the best teams I've had the privilege of working with. And they just like, it's there's not a single person that I would actually not classify as a rock star. They're that good on the leadership team.
What are some of the pain points that you discovered around collaboration that you think AI will be able to alleviate for us?
So I think if you look at one of the big traits with collaboration, that's a necessary trait that for a while, actually, in all honesty, we lost our way on, was ease of use.
Yes.
And it's actually so important. And we were talking about this before we even jumped on this call, that it's not that any of the tools might be hard by themselves, but the fact that they're all different can actually get to be a huge cognitive overload for people.
Yep.
And what we have been conditioned in tech to do is build more and more features. So I actually think what ends up happening with products is you have a product that just starts out, people love it. They're excited about, oh, this is a novelty. They've solved a problem uniquely. Then what ends up happening is all the product managers in the team get convinced that we have to just keep jamming more features. And so we keep building more features. And what that does is actually makes the complexity of that product higher than what it needs to be. And most people don't use all the features. And then before you know it, you've actually got a cognitive overload that's actually not worth the effort for people to go out and use it. With AI, for the first time, what we could do is rather than just occupying more pixels on a screen with more buttons, you can have more features that are launched, which are invisible features behind the scenes. And what that allows you to do is, one, do progressive reveal. So you can say, okay, only have this capability available when it's needed. And two, most of the features, we just make sure that they're invisible anyway. So background noise removal is not a feature that requires a bunch of buttons and activations and this, that, and the other. It just works. And you don't even realize it after a while that it's a feature, because it's a feature that is not necessarily, kind of designed to be discovered. It's a feature that's designed to just be subconsciously used. So that people
it just delivers.
It just delivers behind the scenes. And I think that is the magic of this thing. So that's one area that there's a lot of magic. The second area is, for, 50, 60 years now, humans have been the accommodating party between humans and machines in kind of learning to speak the language of machines.
Yes.
And this is the first time that equation is getting flipped, where machines are learning the way that humans speak. And I think that actually unlocks a huge amount of possibility, because the ease of use with which people can engage when they don't have to learn a certain kind of language, you can now use your brain power on higher order tasks rather than learning how to go out and use a tool. And that's what we need to get better and better and better at.
Yeah, I love that. And I couldn't agree more. I think that AI has the potential to really make us all power users without having to have the learning curve that we would have had in the past.
That's exactly right.
You mentioned ease of use and how in the past that is being put aside, and, coming from covering enterprise, but starting with my heart in the consumer and always thinking about the user first. My mantra was always, you can get security and enterprise level delivery of features and tools without sacrificing user interface and simplicity. With AI, I think that the concerns around privacy and data security are even higher. How do you think about that when you're thinking about WebEx and the tools that you're delivering?
I think you have exactly the right idea, which is security should not be a trade-off on usability. In fact, this is an area, it's actually interesting. It's been a blessing in disguise that was not designed to be, because I run the security business and I run
That's
the
right.
collaboration business. And those are, like, in some ways, one would have thought the two most odd businesses to put under a single leader. But it's actually helped out quite a bit, because what's happened is my collaboration business has gotten more secure and my security business has gotten more usable as a
Yeah.
result of the mindset. You know, and if you think about it, that we have historically always operated in a world where there was a trade-off between usability and security, and I think that's a false choice. In
Mm,
fact, it's not the way that you want the world to be, because if you get security to be very hard to use, so security is one area where the addressable market is 8 billion users, the population of humanity, right?
yep.
And you cannot go out and have 8 billion users using something if it gets to be extremely complicated to use. And security as an industry is jargon ridden. I
Yep.
think it's all largely power users, and it's a very homogeneous group of people that run the security business. And one of the things that I actually have a lot of passion around, and in fact, I was at Davos recently, and we talked about this even with some of the political leaders around the world,
Hmm.
was we need more people with liberal arts backgrounds. We need more people who are women, um, and not power users of security, to participate in the domain of security, so that security gets to be more relatable to humans. And I think right now what ends up happening is it's far too intimidating, and as a result, and that continues to keep compounding, because the people that are building security are the ones who are power users, and they've
Yeah.
got a singular objective, which is how do we go out and keep the bad folks out. But the objective has to be, how do you keep the bad folks out by educating the people, where security is not everyone's full-time job. It is just a thing that they have to do to keep themselves safe. And so I do feel like that trade-off is a false trade-off that we have to get better at. On the collaboration side, um, the team has done a really good job of making sure that both security and other productivity features get to be more invisible, rather than
Hmm.
things that people have to overtly take action on.
Yep.
And the more we can do that, the better off we're going to be. And I think AI is going to help tremendously on that dimension as well. The other thing that, if you think about it, security will be hugely aided by AI, is because what AI can do better than sometimes humans can is detect patterns of behavior that are anomalous, and then act upon that pattern of behavior proactively. Um, and that's something that we can do, because security is a game of data, and the more data you have, the more you can detect whether or not the pattern is anomalous. And so I do feel like that's an area where Cisco has a unique advantage, because we have so much telemetry and so much data on every packet flowing through the network, on every kind of call that gets made on WebEx, on everything that happens, that'll actually allow us to be a more secure world.
I agree with everything that you said. Maybe with the exception of women not being power users, because I think that
No,
the
that's not what
reality.
I'm saying. No, I'm
Okay.
sorry. Just to be, I'm not suggesting that. I'm saying we need to have. There were two concepts. We need to have more women in security, and we need to not only have power users in security.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah,
Now I get it. Because I
yeah.
do think that there's another level when it comes to enterprise and security, is that maybe as a personal, as an individual, I care about my security. When it comes to work, maybe my level of care is not the same, right? And so if you're putting hurdles for my workflow in order for me to be compliant, that is when you have that friction, right? Because my level of care is lower, and then you're asking me to work harder to do what I need to do. And that's when, when you had that friction, in my view.
And by the way, that is the case with not just security, but with everything. I
Yeah,
think
that was very true.
no, the less cognitive load we put on people and the more friction we take out in how people use tech, the
The
better
more
that tech.
engaged. Yep.
The more engagement you'll get from people. And the goal, so one of the goals that we have actually established internally at Cisco seems a little overly simplistic, but in fact is the fundamental thing that changes culture. And that is, our primary goal is to build products that people love, that they talk to their friends and family about. And there's a lot in that statement that's actually important to dissect, because people loving a product means that you have to evoke emotion in a product. You can't just have a job that gets done.
Yep.
And you have to sweat the details. And you have to have them like it so much that they're going to be ambassadors of your product and talk to other people saying, have you heard about this product? Which means you're going to have to work extra hard at doing things to delight users. That has
Yep.
not historically been the goal of a lot of sectors in the enterprise software market.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think that that's changing as well, because the importance of talent, not as much as I would like to, sadly, but focusing more on retention and talent acquisition and really driving satisfaction and engagement has grown over COVID and now. I'm curious, you talked about patterns and AI being able to analyze patterns for security. Do you think that that can apply to collaboration as well? And so having machine learning and then generative AI helping us to maybe read, social cues and really look at patterns in collaboration that help us, have more, that could have been an email, solutions and actually get us to be more effective when we do collaborate?
Yeah, I actually think what AI is going to help us do is allow us to become more aware of how we come across and make sure that we keep in mind um, the way in which we come across, what it needs to be in order to change behavior for the other person. So I'll give you a couple examples.
Okay.
Um, if we're all living stressful lives, but what ends up happening when we are abrasive to each other is it actually creates unnecessary friction.
Mm-hmm.
And the opposite of that is not confronting issues. The opposite of that is having use of language that is constructive, not not demeaning, right? And so if you have a message where you're irritated about something that you've seen, and you're going to say this thing sucks, I don't know who came up with this idea. It was the stupidest idea that's ever existed. That's not going to get you the result that you're looking for from the recipient.
Yes.
But if we were able to then have AI be smart enough to say, hey, do you want to change tone on this? Because this might be a better way to position it. Then in the heat of the moment, what someone wanted to say could actually get assisted with AI to say, oh, yeah, I'd like to say it that way. And it actually makes you a little bit more self-aware.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is actually net positive for society.
That's true.
And what it doesn't do is it doesn't say don't confront the issue. It just says confront the issue where the issue is what is at focus, not a personal attack on someone. And we all, at all times, kind of can get into a mode where you say something that's offensive to someone else. And if there's someone who's by our side as a coach to say, hey, you might want to think about positioning it this way. And if we have a growth mindset, which says, you know what, I'm going to learn and I'm going to get better, then AI could be hugely, additive to the way that we actually go out and engage with each other. I lost my track of my train of thought on what your original question was, but this was
No, it was recognizing patterns and improving the
yeah.
way we collaborate, which I think is absolutely critical. I do think that there's, from a data perspective, I think there's a lot, to my point about having less, this could have been an email. There's a lot that you can do, and you already do that actually with WebEx, as far as, allow me to join a call late and having a summary of what is being said, takeaway with notes for me to action on. There's so much that is not just going to be a time saver, it is actually helping my workflow to be more streamlined and for me to focus on really where I need to focus.
And prevent interrupt modes for everyone else. Like one of
Correct.
the things, like if you step away from your desk and come back, and if the system knew that you had stepped away, and here's what you missed during the time you stepped away, you wouldn't have to say to people, I'm sorry, I had stepped away.
What
What
did
did
I
you say
miss?
again? Yeah.
Yeah.
And that actually takes 8 other people in a meeting and derails them and then breaks their train of thought. Whereas over
Yeah.
here, you don't need to do that. And so I think that those are the kind of things. What we are trying to do with AI right now is we're trying to help with the human in the loop, get the human to be more effective with AI. I think AI is very good also right now at conducting certain tasks,
Mm-hmm.
arguably better than humans. What AI is not good at yet is conducting entire jobs. And and that's an area that eventually AI will get good at, but it's not quite where they are right now. Well, that's
Yeah.
not quite where AI is right now. But I do feel like there's a downside to AI that we should all go in with our eyes wide open as well, around the responsibility that we as a tech community have. Because what ends up happening is if you just wear rose colored glasses on how everything is great with AI, what could end up happening is this state where I think tech has been here in every major disruption we've had up until now, which is the default position of the tech industry has always been there's going to be some disruption that happens to society, and that's just par for the course. And and I don't think that that's actually an effective um, way to think about it, because I think that disruption that happens causes suffering to human life. And
Yes.
when done at scale, we should not only be thinking about the bull case and the upside. It is our responsibility as developers of this technology to also consider and factor in the downside and know that that could actually have a profoundly negative effect on society. And we should not um, release product without actually considering both sides and knowing what we can do to offset that downside. And I just don't think that I don't think we're quite in the quest of speed. What we cannot have is sacrificed responsibility. That can't
I,
happen.
I've talked about this, and I was going to ask you about what ethical considerations are you, thinking about when you're deploying, and you answered the question before I didn't even have a chance to ask. And
Sorry.
nobody is actually, no, is great, because the way that you talked about it, I've never actually heard a tech leader use those words, which, yes, we talked about speed and we talked about ethical consideration, but it's really true what you're saying about being accountable and not being caught up by just the upside, especially with Gen AI. There's a lot of that, right? But there are going to be a lot of people that either because of bias in the data, or because of lack of internet access and connectivity, or what have you, are not going to be part of the decision in the first place, and then the recipient of the positive of that. So
And it's, by the way, it's so sorry to cut you off,
no, not at all.
but it's not just. I think Gen AI is actually not going to be that damaging. What's more
Okay.
damaging is what comes after Gen AI. So let's say that we have, there will be a fair amount of development that we are starting to see happen in robotics, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when someone watches a robot play badminton really well, the first question that comes to mind is that same robot can be trained to be a soldier. And boy, that would be pretty scary if some bad people trained that robot to be a soldier.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the kind of aspects that we have to be thinking about deeply as well on, which is, what do you do to go out and make sure that there's guardrails on having bad actors not go out and participate in this in a way that could be massively disruptive and regressive to society?
Yeah.
And right now, while Gen AI is great, one of the massive downsides that could happen with Gen AI is, if you think about majority of the attacks that happen for ransomware originate with email
Yep.
because of spam attacks. 80% of the attacks that happen originate with email. And emails are going to get more sophisticated in spam because it is going to get harder to detect legitimate activity and distinguish that from a malicious attack.
Right.
Because these emails will get far more bespoke, the grammar mistakes will be taken
Yeah,
out,
we'll be gone.
all of those things will actually happen. So we need to make sure that we're thinking about this deeply, and we need to also make sure that we're thinking about the regulation that is going to be instituted in society,
Yeah.
that we talk about openly. And we need to make sure that there's better public-private partnership and collaboration between the regulators as well as the private sector. And these are all kind of complex problems in society that have to be thought through, that I don't think we have strong and good answers for yet. And if we wait until the damage is done and then say we'll
It's too
fix it,
late.
like in every other kind of example in the past, I think it's going to be too late. Where this might
Yeah.
not be reversible. And so I do
Yeah.
feel like this is a deep responsibility of the tech community and the people building it, collaborating with the people that are creating laws and regulations to work closely. And neither of us should have an out saying that other group is actually the wrong, that is not, is the one whose fault it is. It's like,
Yeah.
it's our responsibility to uh, create a level of understanding, education, and dexterity in the public sector. And it's their responsibility to make sure that they're also reaching out to the private sector, and that has to happen.
I agree. And I think that is true about AI as it is sustainability as well. That interaction of private and public is absolutely critical to get us to where we need to be, because we don't have time, right? To your point, we can't wait till you see the damage that could be done with automation and AI. And we cannot wait, obviously, on the sustainability side. We almost at time, and as always, I have more questions that I have time. But kind of circling and maybe closing the loop on the responsibility part of tech, and in particular when you're thinking about WebEx and bias in some of the decisions that could happen. Like we said, there's cultural differences, there are different abilities that we have, there's different skin tones and everything else that come into play when you're using a tool like WebEx. How can we make sure at our best of ability, because we're not going to be able to take bias out of AI, we can mitigate it. So how do you think about that?
The way that we have tried to approach this problem is, firstly, there's been a massive, like, I'll just give you a few examples, right?
Yeah.
Think about things like accessibility, the ethical use of AI,
Yep.
fairness, transparency, use of data. These are
Yep.
all kind of really important dimensions of how you can do this in the right way. It's important that the people that are building the technology, one, are educated and made aware of the downside consequences. Two, we need to have a framework, which we built about 2.5, 3 years ago, around responsible AI that goes out and helps address issues like transparency, fairness, bias being injected into the training models, all of that stuff. And then what we've done is we've tried to work very hard at saying, one, no one can release code until they've gone through the responsible AI check. And two, we're trying to do more shift left, where even with something like accessibility, rather than doing an after the fact check on accessibility, we actually make sure that that happens with the developers at the time of building.
Right. You design with accessibility in
Design it
mind.
with accessibility in mind. And that doesn't mean that we're not going to screw up. It just means that the screw ups are going to be far fewer because you've actually
Yeah.
taken it way up the food chain in the
Yep.
cycle. And that, I think, is going to be pretty important that we as a company remember that, and especially when you're a company like Cisco, we believe that there's certain things which are basic human rights. Equality for all is a basic human right. That translates
Yes.
to technology. Fairness is a basic human right. Security is a basic human right. Privacy is a basic human right. If your data is going to be used to train a model, you should know that that is actually happening, and you have to approve it.
Absolutely.
You should not be able to do it without consent. So those are the kind of things that we're working really hard on. And I think we've made a lot of progress on that front over the course of the past 3 or 4 years. And we will continue to make sure that that's an area that's going to be just as aggressively dealt with as how quickly can we move to go out and build these technologies.
I think that, to your point, mistakes will happen, but if you are starting with that mindset where it is part of how you design a product or a feature, the same way as security is, the same way as sustainability is, you will end up with a much better product in the end. So I really appreciate your thought leadership on the topic. I wish that we had an hour instead of 30 minutes. Where do people find you on social media? I know you're very active. Where can they find you?
I think LinkedIn and Twitter. I tend to share thoughts over there and create a dialogue in both those platforms. I'm probably a little more active on LinkedIn than Twitter, but both of those, or X. But I can be found on either.
I still call it Twitter. So yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you
Well,
very
that is
much for being with us today. I really appreciate the chat, and I will see you soon.
It's such a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you for having me.